The sun hung low and harsh that afternoon, baking the dry earth of my small farm at the edge of Mornvale Thornwood. I had lived here alone for years, far from the villages and the people who once called me neighbor. After the border wars and the plague that took what little family I had left, I chose this isolation. I built the wooden house with my own hands, dug the well, raised the fences, and set snares and rope nets along the perimeter to catch wolves, horse thieves, or any strangers foolish enough to cross the boundary at night. It was a quiet life, hard but predictable. No one bothered me, and I bothered no one. That day I walked the trap line as usual, boots kicking up dust, crossbow slung over my shoulder. The air smelled of dry grass and distant pine. Most of the snares were empty, just as they had been for weeks. Then I reached the last net, the one hidden among the thorn bushes near the southern ridge. The rope was pulled tight. The counterweight dropped. Something large had triggered it. I expected a wolf or maybe a desperate raider. I pushed through the thorns, knife already in hand, and stopped cold. A woman hung suspended in the net, her body twisted and bound by the ropes. She was Orc, green skin darkened by dust and sweat, powerful frame straining against the cords that cut into her shoulders and thighs. Her leather armor was torn across the chest, one shoulder bleeding from the thorns and the rope's bite. Long black hair clung to her face in sweaty strands. Her yellow-gold eyes burned with fury and terror as they locked on mine. One hand clutched at the ripped front of her tunic, trying to hold it closed. The other gripped a small knife, blade trembling but pointed straight at me. She bared her tusks in a silent snarl. I froze, my heart hammered against my ribs. I had seen orcs before, on the battlefield, never this close, never like this. She was no warrior raiding my land. She was trapped, exhausted, and clearly in pain. "Don't touch me," she growled in broken common, voice raw. The knife shook harder. I took one slow step back, lowering my own blade so she could see it. "If you keep struggling, those ropes will cut deeper," I said quietly. "I'm only going to cut the net, nothing else." She didn't answer, but her breathing grew shallower, chest heaving. She was moments from passing out. I moved carefully, keeping my hands visible, and began slicing the ropes one by one, starting from the ones farthest from her body. Each cut was slow, deliberate. I kept my eyes on the knots, not on her torn clothing or the way her muscles tensed every time the net shifted. When the last rope gave way, she dropped like a stone. I caught her before her face hit the dirt. She was heavier than she looked, solid muscle and bone, but I managed. She shoved weakly at my chest, panic flashing across her face again. "Easy," I muttered. "Your legs won't hold you yet. You want to live? Then stop fighting for a minute." She glared up at me, eyes glassy with exhaustion, but she stopped pushing. I lifted her fully into my arms and carried her back toward the house. Her body was rigid the entire way, every muscle braced for the worst. She never once closed her eyes. Inside the dim cabin, I laid her on the only bed and pulled a wool blanket over her before touching anything else. Only then did I fetch water and clean cloths. I washed the gashes on her shoulder and arm, the scrapes on her legs. She clenched her jaw and stared at the ceiling, refusing to make a sound. When I offered her a cup of water, she drank in small, careful sips, never taking her eyes off me. Before the fever pulled her under, she whispered something so faint I almost missed it. "Noya." I sat on the floor beside the bed, back against the wall, and answered just as softly, "I'm Harlan Crow." She was already unconscious. That first night I slept on the floor by the door, crossbow and sword within easy reach, not to threaten her but to guard the threshold. The fire crackled low. Outside the wind moved through the thorns like distant whispers. Inside there was a second heartbeat in the room for the first time in years. She stirred once or twice with fever, murmuring words in her own tongue I didn't understand. I changed the cool cloth on her forehead and added another log to the fire, but I never touched her more than necessary. I didn't know who she was running from. I didn't know why an orc woman had wandered alone into this dangerous stretch of land. All I knew was that she had been caught in one of my traps, and while she lay under my roof, no one else would turn her into prey again. The cabin felt smaller that night, but not empty. For the first time in a long while, the silence had company. The morning light crept through the single-glass window and the cloth-covered one beside it, soft and pale. I had already been awake for hours, sitting against the far wall with my back to the rough timber, watching the fire burn low. Noya stirred on the bed, Her eyes opened slowly, yellow gold and wary. The first thing she did was check the blanket I had pulled over her the night before, making sure it still covered her completely. Then her gaze moved across the room, the wooden table, the stone hearth, the rack of tools and weapons, the single bed she now occupied. Everything was exactly as it had been when she fell unconscious. She looked at me. "You stayed awake all night?" I nodded once. "Didn't know if you'd wake in fever or in fear. Both needed watching." She said nothing for a long moment. I stood slowly, keeping my movements calm and open. I poured water from the jug into a clean cup and set it on the small stool beside the bed, then stepped back. "You need to drink," I said, "but only if you want to." She stared at the cup like it might bite her. Finally, she reached for it, drank in careful swallows, never taking her eyes off me. When she finished, I spoke again, voice low. "I need to change the bandages. The wounds have to stay clean. If you don't want me near you, say it now. I'll leave the cloth and salve here and turn my back." Noya studied me for what felt like a full minute. The suspicion in her eyes was still there, but it had dulled overnight, worn down by exhaustion and whatever she had seen in my actions so far. At last, she gave a short, stiff nod. I moved carefully. I sat on the edge of the stool, kept my hands visible, and unwrapped the old bandages from her shoulder and arm. The gashes were angry but not infected. I cleaned them gently with boiled water, spread the herbal salve I kept for my own injuries, and bound fresh strips of linen. When my fingers accidentally brushed the side of her neck, she went rigid. I pulled back at once and waited until she relaxed before continuing. She never flinched again after that. When the last bandage was tied, she exhaled a long breath. I moved the stool away and sat on the floor across from her, giving her space. She drank another cup of water, slower this time. Then, in a voice still rough from disuse, she began to speak. "I ran for 2 nights. My father, Grathik Ashen Tusk, wanted to trade me to Varin Bonehand, an old war chief twice my age. In exchange, he would get strong horses and an alliance with Varin's clan. I refused. My father told me a daughter who does not obey is worth less than a sick cow." Her tusks flashed briefly in a bitter smile that did not reach her eyes. "That night, I took a knife, a water skin, and what dry bread I could carry. I slipped past the guards and ran. I did not know the trails through Mornvale. I was already lost when your net caught me." I listened, without interrupting. When she fell silent, I said only, "No one should be traded like livestock." She looked at me then, really looked, as if the words surprised her more than the trap had. After a long pause, she asked, voice quieter, "If they come for me, will you hand me over?" I met her gaze. "I will not give you to anyone." The silence that followed was heavy. She turned her face toward the window, jaw tight, as though she were testing the truth of my words against everything she had ever been taught. Later that morning, she insisted on getting up. "If I lie here too long, fear will grow bigger than my body," she said. I did not argue. I stayed a few paces away while she swung her legs over the side of the bed. She stood, 3 unsteady steps across the floor, and her knees buckled. I moved fast but only caught her elbow, lightly, just enough to steady her. The moment she had her balance, I let go. She looked at my hand, then at me. "You do not treat me like something weak," she muttered. "You are hurt," I answered. "Not useless." She gave a short, surprised huff that might have been the beginning of a laugh. By afternoon, she was sitting on the narrow porch outside, my old cloak draped over her shoulders against the wind. The sun warmed the dry earth and the empty paddock. She watched me move around the yard for a while, then asked, "Why do you live alone?" I kept my answer short. "After the wars, I chose the land instead of people." She nodded slowly, as if the words fit something inside her own chest. "I remember the family I wished they had been," she said, staring at the horizon. "Not the one they truly were." We sat in silence after that. It was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of 2 people who recognized the same cracks in each other. That evening, we ate a simple stew of rabbit and roots. She ate slowly, still testing every bite. When the bowls were empty, she looked at me across the table and said, "When I can stand without falling, I will leave." I met her eyes. "When you can stand without falling, you may choose." She repeated the word under her breath, almost tasting it. "Choose. For the first time since I had cut her down from the net, something in her face softened. Just a fraction, but it was there. She had not heard that word offered to her in a very long time. Outside, the wind moved through the thorns again. Inside, the fire crackled and 2 breathing sounds filled the small cabin. I did not know how long she would stay. I only knew that for the first time in years the house did not feel quite so empty, and the choice I had given her felt like the most important thing I had done in a long while. The 3rd day dawned clear and dry. Noya could already walk short distances without falling, though her steps were still careful and her shoulders stiff beneath the fresh bandages. I watched her from the porch as she moved between the water barrel and the woodpile, testing her strength the way a warrior tests a new blade. She had not spoken much since morning, but the silence between us had changed. Less guarded, more shared. I was sharpening a knife by the door when I saw it, a thin plume of dust rising on the southern trail, moving fast. 2 riders, not orcs, humans by the way they sat their horses, bounty hunters. I knew the look. Hard men who made coin from other people's fear. "Inside," I said quietly. Noya stepped beside me instead, her back straight. "I will not hide behind your walls." "Stand close then," I told her. "Not to hide, to live." The riders reined in 20 paces from the porch. Their leather was dusty and cracked, swords loose in their scabbards. The older one had a scarred jaw and eyes that had long ago stopped caring about right and wrong. The younger carried a coiled rope at his saddle. "Morning," the scarred man called. "We're looking for an orc female, tall black hair, ashen tusk markings, ran from her clan 2 nights back. Big reward if she's found breathing." I kept my hands visible, but my crossbow rested against the doorframe within easy reach. "No one like that here." The younger hunter's gaze slid past me and locked on Noya. A slow grin split his face. "Looks like you found yourself a pet, farmer." Noya's hand tightened on the porch rail. I felt the shame roll off her like heat from a forge. I spoke before she could. "She is here because she was hurt. No one takes a woman by force on my land." The scarred man laughed once, short and ugly. "Bold words for a man alone with an orc bitch. Hand her over and we'll split the coin. Save you the trouble when her clan comes looking." The younger one reached for his sword. My crossbow was up and leveled at his chest before his blade cleared leather. The click of the string sounded loud in the still air. "Draw that and you won't put it back," I said. Both men went very still. They had seen enough killers to recognize one when he spoke without raising his voice. The scarred hunter studied me for a long moment, then spat into the dust. "Fine. Keep your toy for now. But a runaway orc always has a price. Sooner or later someone will come collect." He jerked his chin at his partner. They wheeled their horses and rode south, dust trailing behind them like a promise. I lowered the crossbow only when the dust had settled. Noya's breathing was shallow beside me. "You could have given me to them," she said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes were not. "All your trouble would have ended." I set the crossbow down. "Trouble doesn't end when I do something cowardly." She was quiet a long time, then softer. "No one has ever stood in front of me like that. Should have been someone long before me." She turned her face away, but I caught the shine in her eyes before she hid it. We spent the rest of the day preparing. I moved the horse to the back paddock where it could not be seen from the trail. I reinforced the door bar with an extra beam and checked every shutter. I took down 3 old nets from the perimeter and reset them in new places, closer to the house, angled to catch anyone trying to flank us. Noya worked beside me even though her wounds pulled with every movement. She gathered thorn vines for the tripwires, tied knots with quick, practiced hands, ground fever root into powder, and kept one eye on the eastern ridge the entire time. She did not complain. She simply worked like a woman who had decided she would not be prey again. When the sun dipped low, I changed her bandages once more. This time, she did not flinch when I touched her. Instead, as I tied the final strip, her fingers brushed the inside of my wrist. Light, almost accidental. She left them there for the space of 3 heartbeats, then pulled away. Neither of us spoke about it. That night we ate rabbit stew again, thicker this time with wild onions she had spotted earlier. The firelight danced across the walls. After the bowls were empty, she glanced beneath the bed where the small wooden box still sat untouched. "What is in the box?" she asked. "Things that belong to my wife and child," I said. "I open it when the quiet gets too loud, not every day." She nodded, understanding without pity. The dead should not chain the living. Her words stayed with me long after the fire had burned down to embers. She slept deeper that night, her breathing slow and even. I lay on my pallet by the door, sword and crossbow beside me, but for the first time in years the cabin did not feel hollow. Outside, the hunters were still riding somewhere in the dark, and more would come, but inside, between the crackle of the last log and the steady rhythm of Noya's breath, I understood something new. I was no longer only guarding land. I was guarding a choice, for her and perhaps for myself as well. The morning after the hunters rode away, the air felt heavier, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Noya moved more freely now, her steps steadier, though she still favored her injured shoulder. She had helped me reset the last of the perimeter nets at dawn, her fingers quick and sure on the knots. We worked without many words, but the silence was comfortable now, the kind shared by people who had begun to trust the space between them. Then the dust rose again on the southern trail, thicker this time, 3 riders moving at a trot. I knew before they drew close. These were orcs. Their armor carried the dark iron and bone markings of the Ashen Tusk clan. The lead rider was broad-shouldered, younger than me, but already scarred across one cheek. He wore a chieftain's braid in his black hair. Noya went still beside me on the porch, her hand tightening on the rail until her knuckles paled. "Korak," she whispered. "My cousin." I stepped down from the porch but stayed at her side, not in front of her. This was her blood. She would speak first if she chose to. The 3 riders reined in. Korak's eyes flicked over me, then locked on Noya. His voice carried the rough edge of command. "Noya, your father, Grathok Ashen Tusk, orders you to return. The marriage to Varen Bonehand has been sealed with blood and iron. You will come home and honor the alliance." Noya stepped forward, shoulders squared, the fresh bandage visible beneath her torn leather. She did not hide. "I will not. My father's honor is not worth the chains he would put on my wrists." Korak's face darkened. He jerked his chin at me. "And this human? You let him keep you like some prize? Have you fallen so low?" I answered before Noya could, my voice low and even. "I am not keeping her. The door stands open. If she wishes to leave, I will not bar her way." Noya looked at me for a heartbeat, then back at her cousin. "He speaks truth. Here I am, not traded. Here I am allowed to choose." One of the younger warriors behind Korak snarled and spurred his mount forward, hand dropping to the axe at his belt. Noya did not flinch. She raised her hand, stopping me before I could lift the crossbow. "No," she told me quietly. Then to the rider she drew the small knife from her belt, the same one she had held in the net. With a single sharp motion, she sliced through the braided cord around her neck that held the Ashen Tusk clan token. The carved bone fell into the dust at her feet. "If my clan only wants me when I can be sold, then I am no longer of the clan." The silence that followed was absolute. Korak's face went gray. The token lay there like a broken promise. Even the horses seemed to sense the weight of what had just happened. Korak's voice cracked when he spoke again. "Your father will not forgive this." Noya lifted her chin. "Then my father must learn to live with the knowledge that not everything belongs to him." For a long moment, no one moved. Korak stared at his cousin as though seeing her for the first time. Finally, he gave a sharp signal. The 3 riders wheeled their mounts and rode back the way they had come, dust rising behind them like a retreating storm. When the last hoofbeats faded, Noya's legs trembled. She did not fall, but she turned toward me and pressed her forehead against my chest just once, breathing hard. I stood still. My hand rose slowly and rested lightly on her back, nothing more. She did not pull away. "I do not want to run any more," she said against my shirt. "Then do not run," I answered. "Stay because you choose it, not because of debt, not because of fear." She stayed there a moment longer, then stepped back, eyes bright but steady. "If I stay, then this house becomes yours as much as mine." The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. Noya grew stronger with every sunrise. She helped me reset the traps so they would only catch animals, never people. She planted fever root and wound heel around the well. She tended the horse with a gentleness I had not expected from an orc warrior, brushing its coat until it gleamed. She mended my torn cloaks with stitches far neater than my own. She walked the eastern ridge each evening, eyes sharp, learning the land the way she had once learned battlefields. The cabin changed with her in it. There was the soft scrape of her boots across the floorboards, the low sound of her humming an orcish melody while grinding herbs, the way she left a second cup of water on the table without being asked. At night, the fire burned a little brighter because 2 people fed it instead of 1. One late afternoon, I found her standing at the fence line, looking west toward the thornwood. The sun painted the dry grass gold. I walked up beside her but kept a small distance. "Are you thinking of leaving?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No. I am thinking, for the first time, that the road does not have to lead away from me. It can lead here, if I choose it." I understood what she meant. This place that had been my exile had become something else for her. And for me it was no longer only a shelter from the world. It was the beginning of one I had not known I still wanted. I did not reach for her hand. I did not need to. We stood together and watched the light stretch long across the land we now shared. 2 people who had once been caught in different kinds of traps, now choosing together to stay free. The final attack came at dusk on the 5th day when the sky had turned the color of old blood. I was checking the last of the reset nets near the back paddock when I heard the thunder of hooves. 4 riders this time, led by a massive orc warrior whose armor was heavier than any I had seen. Varen Bonehand. His name had been spoken like a curse by Noya more than once. He sat tall on a black warhorse, axe strapped across his back, face scarred and eyes burning with the certainty that everything he wanted already belonged to him. Behind him rode 3 more warriors, ropes and chains clinking at their saddles. They came straight for the house. Noya stepped out onto the porch beside me, bow already in her hand, a fresh quiver at her hip. She had grown strong again in these short days. The fear was still in her eyes, but it no longer ruled her. "They have come for me," she said quietly. "Then they will have to go through both of us," I answered. We had prepared. The nets I once used to catch strangers had been moved and strengthened. 2 of Varen's men broke off to circle the paddock, trying to flank us. The moment their horses crossed the hidden line, the counterweights dropped. Ropes snapped tight. Both riders were yanked from their saddles with a shout, crashing into the dust. Their horses bolted, the nets held. Varen roared in fury and charged the front yard. I met him with my sword drawn. He was stronger than me, built like a mountain, but I had spent years learning how to fight smarter, not harder. I gave ground, letting him swing wide, then stepped inside his reach and slashed at the straps of his armor. Steel rang against steel, sparks flew. Noya did not stand idle. She loosed an arrow that slammed into the dirt between Varen's boots, a warning shot that made him hesitate for half a second. "Stop!" she shouted. "I do not belong to you." He laughed, a ugly sound. "Your father accepted the bride price. You were promised." "Then let him collect the price from my father's tent," she answered, voice steady. "Not from my body." Varen swung again. I caught the blow on my blade, the impact jarring my arms to the bone. We circled each other in the yard. I was breathing hard. He was bleeding from a cut on his forearm where my sword had found a gap. That was when 2 more riders appeared on the ridge, Grethok, Ashen Tusk, and Korak. The chieftain's face was carved from stone as he took in the scene, his daughter standing armed beside a human, 2 of Varen's warriors still struggling in my nets, and Varen himself bleeding in my yard. Varen pointed his axe at Noya. "She is mine by right. Order her home, Grethok, or I will take her by force and shame your clan." Grethok said nothing at first. He simply watched his daughter. For the first time, I saw something flicker across the old chieftain's face. Uncertainty, perhaps even a trace of pride. Noya walked forward until she stood between me and her father. She looked up at Grethok without lowering her bow. "Father," she said, voice clear and carrying, "you once told me a daughter who refuses is worth less than a sick cow. Today I cut the cord that bound me to that lie." She reached up, pulled the last remnant of her clan braid from her hair and dropped it at his horse's feet. "If your honor demands I be sold, then I renounce that honor. I am no longer Ashen Tusk. I am Noya, and I choose here." The silence that followed was absolute. Grethok stared at the braid in the dust. Varen started to protest, but the chieftain raised one hand and silenced him with a single glare. "The marriage is broken," Grethok said at last, the words heavy. "The alliance is ended. Take your men and go, Varen Bonehand. There is nothing for you here." Varen's face twisted with rage, but he knew better than to challenge his former ally in front of witnesses. He spat once, wheeled his horse, and rode away with his remaining warriors. Grathik lingered a moment longer. His eyes met Noya's. There was no apology in them. Chieftains do not apologize, but there was something close to acceptance. Then he turned and followed the others, leaving only dust and the fading light. When the sound of hooves had completely vanished, Noya lowered her bow. Her hands were shaking. She turned to me and without a word stepped into my arms. This time, I did not hesitate. I held her, one hand on her back, the other cradling the back of her head. She pressed her face against my shoulder and breathed like a woman who had finally set down a weight she had carried her entire life. "I lost a family that never truly held me," she whispered. "But I did not lose myself." I kissed the top of her head the first time my lips had touched her. "Then from today, this place can be home, if you want it to be." She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her yellow eyes were steady and warm. "I want it, not because you saved me, not because I owe you. I want it because when I am with you, I do not have to make myself smaller to be safe." I rested my forehead against hers. "And I do not love you because you needed saving. I love you because you chose to stay." We stood like that until the stars came out. Two people who had begun their story caught in a trap of rope and fear. The net that had once held her prisoner now lay harmless in the yard, a reminder of how easily something meant for capture could be turned into protection. The cabin waited behind us, small, simple, no longer lonely. Inside, the fire would be lit again tonight by two hands instead of one. Tomorrow we would repair the damage from the fight, plant more herbs, mend the fences, and live the quiet life we had both chosen. The story began the day a woman of the Orc clans was caught in my trap. She thought I would use her weakness against her. Instead, I cut the ropes, covered her, tended her wounds, and gave her the one thing no one else ever had, the right to choose. And in the end, she chose me. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because here, with me, she was finally free.